Okay, welcome back to part three of our hangout with Andrew Gillott. So, Andrew, we've had a really interesting chat about coach education, coach development. I guess mostly either backwards looking or what's going on now, but I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on, I guess, two things. What's the future of coaching, and therefore, what does the future of coach development need to look like?
So just two small questions then before going off for a cup of tea. We talked in part one, I think, about the chefs and the cooks analogy and how that got some traction, but that it is difficult to see where the future for the cook lies. I think the expectation from sport, from people engaging in activities and engaging in sports, looking for coaches, the expectations are rising all of the time, and I don't understand really. I'm sure there's good reason for it, and someone watching this will take the time to explain to me, but I don't understand how there could be a future for the cook in an environment of increasing complexity. Equally, I think the future for coaches generally is that, well, I would like to think that the future will consist in them being regarded much more as developing practitioners as opposed to people who are filling a workforce role. And that coach education and coach development will be focused upon that. But to do that, we have to move away from the idea of a competency framework, and I like the idea of the future looking more like what Andy Abraham and Dave Collins referred to at some point in the early 2000s as ideal thinking rather than ideal solutions. And I really like that phrase, that the training in the future to deal with increasingly complex environments is to be able to be a chef or cook, to display ideal thinking rather than ideal solutions. I like that a lot.
I guess wrapped up in that as well is the notion that we perhaps don't even know which sports kids will want to take part in the future. There's certainly a shift towards more of the, let's say, adventure sports coming mainstream, which of course are more dynamic and creative environments. But for me, that makes it all the more important that we help to shape and create adaptable learners who can shift their context. And likewise, we're seeing in the working world that people are having multiple careers within a lifetime, if you like, that there isn't one job you have for life. You need an adaptable skill set, which I guess also comes to one of the things that we hold dear in our approach to helping people be the best through sport, is that it is exactly that. It's about using sport as a vehicle for personal betterment so that it helps you in all aspects of your life. So I think there's so many reasons to shift that focus. But
yeah, that sounds right to me. I mean, the work that we're talking about is the strangest of strange attractors, and we need to, people, rather than try and explain away the complexity of things, if we can develop, I mean, I talked about it in part two a little, but I really think the focus should be on building the learning power of the practitioner, and using common theories of reflective learning, decision making, judgment, because again, I've taken to using this phrase, my experiences, because I worry that when people say my experience, they're in a way trying to leverage the idea that they're right and someone's wrong. But so my experience has been that practitioners sort of who are able to really make the thinking visible, they reach this critical mass, and in that respect they start to attract knowledge from disparate corners of disparate domains and synthesize new ideas with existing ideas, and which I think we might call learning, and create new thinking tools, and they become more flexible and more dynamic, and they reach greater mass. And perhaps that's a bit too prosaic a metaphor, but that's really how I see it. It's about building the learning power of practitioners, not trying to control the flow of knowledge.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I guess that what that brings us to is something that I know you have a passionate interest in, is bringing more artistry back to the job of coaching and the job of development. And I think I'll throw in the word now, because I think it's apt, is that we've got to return to storytelling and a narrative as a means of sharing those experiences and learning from them.
Yeah, storytelling. Yeah, the story is the shortest distance between two human beings. It's the either the internal or the external dialogue or the external monologue are the most fundamental building blocks of developing expertise. And I think whichever way you slice it, the examples of good practice that we might all draw upon, be that community practice, online learning platforms, situated learning, apprenticeship models, what it all comes down to is watching in action narratives taking place, be they internal or external. That if you can just, as a practitioner, develop the ability to have that, even an internal monologue as step one, it's such a powerful tool for moving your practice on. Because I sort of see knowledge and experiences as, I know this is a rather mixed metaphor, but it's just the way I see the world. And so I see all these experiences as sort of like a raw egg through a spinning bicycle wheel. And fragments going everywhere, and whatever we just stay in our heads, we think we have a cohesive picture. And I'm sure many of us will have had that experience where when someone asks us to tell them what we think about something, we suddenly find it harder than we'd imagined it might be. Or we might even begin to speak and then say, oh, actually, I'm not sure that is what I think. Just give me a moment. And that's the power, I think, of narrative, that consolidating disparate ideas into really crisp, clear monologue and dialogue is where professional development really takes place.
For sure. I think Mark and I have talked a lot about that notion of I guess the difficulty in this. There's so many exciting things about where all this might lead, but the difficulty often lies in the anxiety about not knowing. And one of the things we're really got to get comfortable with is not knowing. And it's not that we just want people to go around telling each other stories. The point of critical reflection is that you're willing to open yourself up to not knowing. And I think that's often one of the hardest things to explore, but certainly the most fruitful if we can get there. Certainly if we can get there in a group context, in a we've used the phrase a few times, a community of practice. But again, that's an effortful exercise, and are we willing to go there? I suppose is one of the toughest questions.
Yeah, you describe it as a difficult exercise, Al, and I wouldn't disagree given experiences in the past and general lie of the land right now. But, community practice are known to fail for a number of reasons, and probably more of them fail than survive. But my own belief, and it's simply that, I have little or no evidence to support this other than having lived through some of it, is that I don't think that the importance of the community of practice where they fail is clear enough to the practitioners taking part. And I just have a belief that that when people see that something is critical to them, they take part in it. And when they don't see that, and it's more like an added extra or the cherry on the cake or something you might do if you've got time, then you're likely to not take part in it. So if we create that model whereby the learning takes place between people, we know that our success as experts or developing practitioners depends upon our dialogue, then I think we might more readily get involved in it. That's why the three of us are talking, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that raises its own challenge, because if we extend that to the athlete as learner, it's again something that Mark and I have had a few talks with sports around and created certainly a lot of anxiety around, is if we make athletes more able as learners and communities of learners, where does the coach lie? What's left for the coach to do if athletes start to lead their own learning more effectively?
Yeah, well, I like the analogy of the again, perhaps mine, perhaps someone else's. These things get lost in the midst of time, don't they? But I like the idea of the coach as the manual. You know, and that we don't just read the manual before we jump in. But when we get stuck, we really do need the manual. And being able to find the right reference in the manual and fix the problem and get help with that is, we recognise that as being the most critical, one of the most critical elements in problem solving. One was to recognise we needed the manual. That's about self-regulation and learnacy, you might call it. And then the other bit is the expertise that the manual brings. At the moment, we're just all embedded, I think, in the model that the coach knows everything, they bring everything to the table, they control the flow of knowledge, as we've discussed. Whereas having more self-regulated athletes with their own greater sense of learning power, who, when they need help, know who to go to, and being guaranteed they'll have someone really expert and formidable in the true sense of the word in order to support them through the next bit of the journey. I mean, I'd take that. I'd for sure take that as a coach.
Mark, you get any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think it maybe leads into a bit of our concepts around storytelling and sharing as well. So, Andrew, until that narrative about reimagining coaching gains more momentum, not much will change for me. So the future will actually look quite similar. So we need massive more momentum around narrative, around how you just described, and how Al, probably a few minutes earlier, maybe described the role of the coach, facilitating, getting away from its tell, command and control. That narrative has to change. And so we, creative ways to help that, I think are actually endless. And with technology and sharing platforms today, it's definitely possible. So I think that's the first step, is actually almost redefining coaching. So in 20 years' time, when someone gets into coaching, or a parent or administrator is asked, what's the role of the coach? What's good coaching? Hopefully we get quite a different narrative to what we maybe hear more often than not now.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I mean, at the moment, it's true that we've created an environment, the air that the coaches breathe, if you like, the water they swim in, it all consisted of a very, very strict formal narrative. And it would be a very brave coach at the moment who would care to break out of that mold. They would probably be seen as not coaching. And we know the stories about, what unfortunately now it appears to be referred to as hands-off coaching as opposed to coaching, because that's what it is. But compared to what we consider to be hands-on coaching, it's hands-off. And that in those circumstances, I think you shared examples of that, Mark, where parents, or indeed the athletes themselves and other coaches, think the coach isn't doing a good job because they look like they're coaching. So I mean, that is not a conducive environment for people to experiment in.
Yeah, and it leads in as well to, I hear that examples of that almost weekly, actually, about the pressures on coaches and a lot. So it's about this system level thinking too, and systems thinking. There's all these things that are interconnected, and so often why we may be seeing a different change in coaching behaviour, it's not to do with the knowledge, skills, thinking of the coach. It's actually to do with the social environment that they're embedded in and the culture they're embedded in. And so it's important to think sometimes to change or to get a change might not be working directly with coaches. There might be other factors in that environment that we need to target. I'm really big at the moment. I think people who make decisions about coaches and coaching, we've got to start to try and influence as well, because I think that has big ramifications for perpetuating the types of people that get opportunities in coaching roles and what's perceived to be quality and effective coaching.
Yeah, recently a senior person in the sport had made a comment about a coach who I would recognise as being creative and really working towards expertise using some of the concept that we've discussed so far. But the senior person had said that they were not confident that coach had what it took because they seemed to be quite preoccupied with taking on board new ideas. And what they needed is someone who could just take one idea and work with it.
Right. Exactly.
I was kind of alarmed by that.
Yeah, yeah. A little bit speechless maybe for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it does highlight this almost paradox, doesn't it? And I'm not clear on myself how to deal with it, where, yes, there is this need potentially for the coach to create belief in, you know, what they're doing, and not to say that they're doing it the right way, but they sort of know, they have, you know, competency, they know what they're talking about, but at the same time to have this doubt as well, and this curiosity and this thirst to consider and think critically and reflect and say, am I actually doing it the best way it could be done? And it's an interesting interaction between those two elements.
Yeah, it is tough, isn't it? There's always like an inbuilt need for a lack of self-confidence at some level.
Yeah.
I agree that there is a paradox there, but if we had the processes and structures in place within sports where that was just simply accepted and supported,
yeah,
then, you know, we'd also get rid of imposter syndrome, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
That everybody goes through. We'd get rid of that because people would have an opportunity to talk about their fears.
Yeah.
And maybe over time would become a strength, you know, that you might be regarded as being somewhat stronger, better as a coach if you're able to, say, come up with 3 things that you didn't think you were particularly good at as opposed to 2. And that might become a new way. We might have a new level of certification, which is around lack of self-confidence as opposed to how many boxes you could tick on a competency framework.
Brilliant. So a pretty small challenge looking forward then, guys. I think on that we'll probably aim to wrap up. Andrew, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We'll look forward to having many more of these conversations, and likewise look forward to your growing contribution to My Fastest Mile, and hopefully we'll have a few more interesting offerings for everyone out there as we go forward. But for now, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot.